Let's continue. Chapter 40 opens with two sonnets by Aguilar dedicated to the Spanish soldiers who lost their lives at La Goleta, those who, fallen in defeat, rose up in victory, and who surrendered their lives to long-bladed knives. In some, La Goleta was a kind of national martyrdom, like the Masada, Numancia, or the Alamo. The rest of the chapter tells how the captive arrived in Algiers and how he planned his escape. Here's a third autobiographical detail. Between 1575 and 1580, Cervantes, along with 25,000 other Christians, was a slave in the baths or prison camps of Algiers. We also know he tried unsuccessfully to escape several times until finally some Trinitarians paid his ransom. The captive tells how his master, Admiral Uchali Fartax, had been a renegade in his youth. A renegade was someone who rejected his faith in order to convert to another. According to legend, Uchali was an Italian galley slave at the oars of the Ottoman fleet who renounced his Christian faith for the sole purpose of obtaining the right to take revenge on a Moor who had insulted him. The narrator also tells us how Uchali eventually became Pasha, or viceroy, or governor of Algiers, stressing that he achieved this not by using those vile and devious means typically used by those most privileged by the Grand Turk. According to Francisco Rico, this phrasing refers to the belief held by Christians that those who held power in the Turkish Empire were either corrupt, castrated, or sodomites. The captive reiterates that Uchali was a morally good man and treated his slaves most humanely. Note that the treatment of slaves remains key, and also how sexual conduct becomes an acute issue here. Uchali dies and the captive becomes the slave of Athan Aga, who for his part had captured the interest of Uchali as a cabin boy, becoming one of his most pampered laddies. That is, he was his favorite boy lover. Pretty hot, no? Athan Aga is remarkably cruel, but the captive is happy to be brought to Algiers because this brings him closer to Spain. And as he says, I never gave up on the hope of freedom. Okay, the main issues so far in the captive's tale: 1, the proper definition of caballero; 2, the treatment of slaves; 3, sodomy; and 4, freedom. Now for the fourth and final autobiographical detail. The captive says they put a chain on him and placed him with a group of slaves who were to be ransomed. And so I spent my life in that camp with many other caballeros. His master tortures his slaves in myriad ways, reminding us of the theme of sodomy as well as Don Quixote's curious ear. Every day he hanged someone, impaled this one, cut the ear off that one. Then the captive notes that only one held him at bay, a certain Spanish soldier named something de Saavedra. The captive says Saavedra behaved heroically, but gives no details. Some critics say this nexus of narrative silence, sodomy, prison, and the peculiar treatment given Saavedra indicates that Cervantes had a homosexual experience in Algiers. We know that those who returned from Moorish territory lived under two suspicions: apostasy and sodomy. In Cervantes' case, who knows? However, the possibility of his being sodomized in Algiers can help explain certain aspects of the novel. For example, the scatological relationship between Sancho and Don Quixote, or the chaos of sexual identities in the Sierra Morena. And thinking again about the relation between form and content, notice how radical the text has become here. Thanks to a narrator who describes Saavedra as a stranger, Cervantes has introduced himself into his novel as a character, not just an author as he does elsewhere. It is at this point that we learn that the captive's salvation depends on female intervention as well as commercial and monetary exchange. Parallel to Don Fernando and his 3 riders, one day the captive is in the bath with 3 companions, playing at who could jump furthest with our chains, when a reed appears from a window above the courtyard. Remember how Chapter 2's prostitutes gave Don Quixote wine using a reed. The reed has a handkerchief tied to it containing 10 theanis, which are gold coins used by the Moors, each worth 10 of our reales. Then, from the same window, a very white hand appears, and the slaves signal their appreciation by making deep bows, the salams used by the Moors. Finally, the hand displays a small cross made of reeds. According to the captive, thus all our free time from that point on was spent contemplating the North Star of the window where there had appeared to us the guiding light of that reed. Notice the astronomical metaphor, which reminds us of Don Quixote approaching the citadels, alcázares of his redemption in Chapter 2, as well as so many of the novel's other male characters pursuing quasi-divine women like so many stars. Note also that Zoraida's name in Arabic means the Pleiades, or 7 sisters, a star cluster in the constellation of Taurus.